Hi, everyone. Welcome back. You have found True Colors, which is a show I like to do about true crime and my art, which is coloring based. If you're coming in for the first time, we want to welcome you. If you're coming back, so glad to have you here and thank you back. Today, our case is going to be on Tamla Horsford. So let's talk about who Tamla was. Tamla Horsford was a mother, a wife, a friend. At the time of her death, she was 40 years old. Her husband was Leander, who I mostly see referred to as Lee, and they were married for 16 years. And they had 5 boys, and she also had a stepdaughter, although her stepdaughter didn't live with her at the time of her death. But she had 5 boys ranging from the age of 4 to 14. And she was a really extremely family-oriented person. She was very dedicated to her husband and her children, and she would always put their needs before herself, kind of no matter really what the situation was. She was a big football mom, and she loved being a football mom. She would go to all of her games. She used to volunteer at the kids' school, and so she really did a lot for her family. So originally they had lived in Florida, and they moved to Cumming for a better job for Lee. And Tamla was really excited about this opportunity. She thought it was a good opportunity for her and her husband. She thought it was a great opportunity in Cumming for the boys as well, because Cumming was a big football community, and her kids were very, very, very into football. So she was really happy about the move. Tamla was a very easygoing person. She was very extroverted. She loved to talk to people. She made friends very easily. She really loved getting to know people, and she made you feel like you had been friends forever after just briefly meeting her. A lot of people who talk about Tamla and the horrific circumstances that surround her death bring up information about the past and history of the county, which is Forsyth County in Georgia, that she lived in, as they believe it had a big part to play in the case. And there is definitely a possibility that it might have. But, I mean, in my opinion, it definitely did lead to some mishandling of the way that the case was investigated. And we'll get more into that. But basically, the history of Forsyth County is that it was a very prejudiced county. At one point had even pushed out all people of color out of the county. And so it's rumored to still be a very prejudiced county at this moment. I don't live there. I don't really know. I don't really have any facts that suggest it is still, a very prejudiced county. But to me, definitely this case had some mishandling of it, no matter what the reason was. Something in the investigation just kind of fell apart. So Tamla met her best friend, Michelle Graves, while they were living in Cumming. They were friends for around 5 years, and Michelle has always been a huge advocate for Tamla and everything, trying to find justice for her over what happened. And I feel like now is a really good time to get into what exactly happened. So the whole story is going to start on November 23rd, 2018. Tamla was invited to an adult slumber party for a friend of hers. They weren't great friends. They knew each other from their kids. Their kids were in football together. And the person's party, it was a birthday party for Jean. And it was Jean's 45th birthday party. and it was at Jean's house, and the party was being thrown by Stacy, and a lot of the women that were there, it was supposed to be an all women's party. There weren't supposed to be any men there. A lot of the women there were all from parents of the football team, so they all kind of knew each other. They were all kind of acquaintances, but Tamla didn't know any of them overly well. But she didn't get out a whole lot. She was super excited to be invited and get to know some of them more, and just have a great time. So even though there weren't supposed to be any men at the party, Jose, who was 27 and was also boyfriend to Jean, and he was there. And I want to make a note here that says that he was a pretrial court officer for Forsyth County. And it's really important that you remember that. It does come back into play later. But he was there at the party, as well as Stacy's husband, Thomas. And it was said that really kind of neither of them felt like leaving and going out. Both of them really wanted to stay in. Jose couldn't be at his house for whatever reason, so he talked to Jean and said, "Hey, Jean, I don't want to be at my house. Thomas doesn't really feel like going out either. Can we stay here? But I promise we'll stay in the basement." So Jean agreed, and for the most part, they did stay in the basement the whole time, except for at some point when the food was finished, they decided to come upstairs to get food, and then after that, they just kind of stayed upstairs with the women. Madeline, who was Jean's aunt, was also present at the house the night of the party, as well as she was living in the apartment that was in the basement of the house. So we've got, I think the total was about 8 people who were at the party, and everything was seeming to be going well. The party was said to have started around 6:30. That's when the first people started arriving. But Tamla, again, who was very dedicated to her family, and she really wanted to make sure that everything was set up for Lee to have the easiest time possible with the boys. And so she made sure she made dinner for them. She put them to bed. She even made a casserole for them to have for breakfast the next morning before she left. So, she's just making sure everything's taken care of. I would do the same thing if I was going out for the night. I would have made sure my kids were taken care of. I would have made sure my husband was taken care of. Everything had to be put away. So she also, on her way, decided to stop and pick up a bottle of her favorite imported tequila to bring as a gift for Jean. And, she thought it was a really nice thing. She really loved it, so she really wanted Jean to have it. So she ended up arriving at the party sometime between 8 and 8:30. And now the original plan for the party was to watch the football game, have some drinks, have some food, hang out for the sleepover. And everybody that was there said that Tamla was in the best mood. She was having a great time. She was really happy to have some time away from the house with some girls. I mean, if you think about it, she's living in a house with 5 boys, her 5 boys that were her kids and her husband. So she's in a house with 6 boys. I'm sure she was just over the top to have some girl time. So happy so that around 10 o'clock, she called Lee just to tell him how much of a wonderful time she was having and how excited she really was. She also made a call over FaceTime with her stepdaughter so that she could show her stepdaughter off to the rest of the people that were at the party. She just seemed to be really having such a wonderful time. Many of the people at the party said they even remember seeing Tamla outside smoking a joint at one point, although you'll find later that none of them would ever admit to any personal marijuana use themselves, and this kind of comes up later again. So just keep your mind on it. Just keep it there. It's a small fact, but it's one of those really kind of weird things. I mean, you're at a party, you're at someone else's house. You're not just going to come over to someone else's house and smoke some pot without knowing that either A, they do it themselves, or B, they're going to be okay with it. And later on, they really kind of make it sound like it's such a horrible, horrible thing. And This was only 2 years ago, folks. In many, many states, marijuana is becoming legalized, so it's not that big of a deal. So I don't know why they try and make it such a huge issue, but I'm sure at least one other person was out there, enjoying with Tamla. So it's also reported that Tamla drank quite a bit, but it's also stated by every person there, in every report from every person that was at the party, they said she did not appear uncontrollably drunk. She didn't appear like she was stumbling or falling, like she couldn't handle herself. She just seemed like she was kind of buzzed at best and never seemed to be like off balance. They all said there was only one who got really, really drunk and had to like be carried to bed, and that was Jennifer. And they all repeated multiple times that Tamla never seemed like she was out of control. Tamla and Bridget were said to be the last ones who were awake at around 1:45, and it was about this time that Bridget's husband came to pick her up. Now, Tamla walked with Bridget to the door when her husband got there, and, she said goodbye to Bridget. She told Bridget how much she enjoyed her company, and she wished she'd stayed longer, and she was just really happy to, have had the opportunity to hang out with them. And so this is said to be the last time that anyone saw Tamla alive. And here's where everything in the story just gets incredibly weird. So now we're going into 8:30 in the morning on November 4th. And this is as per Madeline's story through her police interview. Madeline had gotten up and was starting to get ready for the day, and she was in the kitchen and she was making coffee. And that was when she looked out the window and she noticed something in the grass, and it kind of looked like pajamas. And soon she realized that it was Tamla. And it was easy to identify Tamla because of what she had worn. So she had worn one of the onesies, like the adult onesies, and it was actually really adorable. You can see it, some of the pictures. It had little paw prints all over it, and she looked phenomenal in it. By the way, Tamla was beautiful. And you can see in all her pictures by her radiating smile that everything that people had said about her and her personality was just spot on. So in Madeline's police interview, she's quoted saying, I didn't start the coffee. I got on my knees and I said a prayer, and then I ran upstairs and I knocked on the door, and I thought I heard water running, and I thought maybe it was Jean taking a shower. So I went downstairs because I was thinking maybe I shouldn't wake them up. Maybe she's up already. So I went downstairs and I looked out the window again, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I was saying inside my head, she's not moving. So then I went and I knocked on the door louder, end quote there. So you'll notice that a lot of the quotes from the interviews, they're very jumbled. A lot of them just don't make sense. So in this, she's saying she was starting to make the coffee for the day, and she saw Tamla out in the back, and she noticed Tamla wasn't moving. So before she does anything else, she stops making the coffee and she just drops to her knees and says a prayer. Number one, why aren't you going to go check on that person? Okay, I get it. If you're scared, that's fine and understandable, but this is an emergency. You see someone not moving, you're thinking the worst, but you can't handle the situation. So the next thought, yes, go get someone else. Absolutely, I agree. You run upstairs and you hear what you think is water running. That's fine, okay, but this is an emergency. Don't run back downstairs and run away from it. Push, because I promise you they're going to hear the door through the shower, like someone knocking on the door frantically. You can draw attention to an emergent situation. But then she runs back downstairs and just looks out the window and does nothing again. Okay, and mind you, everyone, these are all my opinions. Why? Why would you do that? But then she goes back upstairs and starts pounding on the door again. So this was 8:45. This was the second time that Madeline had knocked on Jean's door, and Jean finally answers at 8:45, and she said her and Jose were sleeping. So now we have Madeline saying that Jean has answered the door and tells Madeline that they were sleeping. Where did the running water come from? She thought she heard the shower running. So already we're starting to see inconsistencies in the first minute after supposedly Tamla was found. And just hold on to your seat because it gets even worse. So Madeline looks at Jean and says, hey, I need to talk to Jose. I need to speak to him right away. And she proceeds to tell them that Tamla was out in the backyard. But it wasn't just that she said, hey, Tamla's out in the backyard or your friend is out in the backyard. She specifically said, your friend from the island is laying down in the backyard, and specifically wanted Jose to look at her. Now, it's not really clear why she specifically wanted Jose to look at her. My assumption is because, again, so Jose was a pre-trial court person at the time. He had also had a lot of history in law enforcement before. He used to work as a probation officer. So we think that the whole idea is because of his history in law enforcement that it would be easy for him to know what to do in a situation like this. So they did go downstairs and they went outside. And when they got outside, they found Tamla, and she was face down in the dirt and the grass. And when I say face down, I mean literally with her face in the dirt. Like most of the time when you're laying down on your stomach, you have your head turned to the side so you can breathe, or like even if you fell, you would turn your head to the side. It is a natural human reaction. But Tamla was face first in the ground. And they noticed there wasn't really a whole lot of blood to be seen around her body or anything like that. That's also noted in a lot of the police reports. It's also very important at this moment to note that CPR was never attempted on Tamla. No one ever tried to turn her over. No one ever tried to see if she was breathing. Jose does state that he touched her back and attempted to see if she was breathing, but he also said he tried to move her leg, but that she was completely stiff and that he couldn't bend her leg. But my question is, of all the things to do to try and see if someone is alive or breathing, why are you going to try and move their leg? So it was at 8:59 that Jean called 911. And so she tells the dispatcher about the sleepover party, and she tells them about what she sees in front of her with Tamla. And she says, quote, "We were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking and we just went outside and she's laying in the backyard." Jean then described the position of Tamla's body to the 911 dispatcher after saying it looks as though she face planted. Face planted being the exact word that she used. And by every description I've heard, face planted would had to have been what Tamla did in order to get into the position she was in. And then, before anything else, it's suggested by Jean to the 911 operator that Tamla maybe had fallen off the balcony, and at that point she hands the phone over to Jose. Jose tells the 911 operator at some point that he sees a small cut on her wrist. And this is important because this is also like leading questions to me. He tells the 911 operator that he sees a small cut on her wrist and that she's not breathing whatsoever. And it's very important we make sure to note, he says at this point she is not breathing whatsoever and that he doesn't know if the cut is self-inflicted. So the 911 operator starts asking, well, do you know if she was suicidal at all? So now they're thinking, how can I work with this? So Jose later goes on to tell the 911 operator that he's not sure if she's breathing at all. And that's why I say it's very important to note he said she's not breathing whatsoever. Now he's gone on to he isn't sure if she's breathing at all. So the 911 operator, they're still talking back and forth. Later on, the 911 operator asks, well, is she moving or breathing at all? And after multiple times of saying she isn't breathing at all, or he's not sure, or she's completely stiff, Jose just says, you know what? I completely can't tell. And at no point during the call does the 911 operator ask if he wants to attempt CPR or offers any help in any way of trying to offer any aid to Tamla, which to me is ridiculous. At the very, very least, they need to say, do you feel like she is beyond resuscitation? And if they say no, then you do things to make it to where you can try and find out, okay, I need you to put your mouth near your ear near their mouth. There's things you can do to try and find signs of life. So the dispatcher starts asking questions about if she was suicidal at all. And then Jose tells the dispatcher, I'm not really sure. I don't really know her all that well. I only met her like one time before this, and it was kind of the same. The other people at the party had only met her a time or two before that, so nobody really knew the answer to that question, of course. And so the dispatcher asks, well, how high is the balcony? And Jose responds with, and this is a direct quote, it's about 20 feet from where your feet are standing on the railing. So instead of just, oh, she fell, like if she fell, sure, okay, it's a plausible answer. But if you're just falling, you're not going to be standing on the railing. That would be if you're trying on purpose to hurt yourself. If you're just falling, you're just going to lean too far from the railing and you're going to flip over. So to add to that, and let's get into that for a second, Tamla was short. She wasn't very tall at all. And the railing for the balcony was about 3 to 3.5 feet tall. So if you're 5 foot something and you're leaning on a balcony that's 3.5 feet tall, you definitely would have had to have climbed up on the balcony to be able to, you would have had to have used a chair or something else to get even up on top of the balcony. You wouldn't have just been able to climb up on it willy-nilly. As being a person who's only 5 foot nothing myself, I can concur that would be true. I would have to use a chair or something. It's not that it's overly tall, 3.5 feet, but it's tall enough that you can't just swing your leg over it. So it would have really had to have been on purpose that she would have done this. So then at this point, Jose tells the 911 dispatcher, hey, you know what? We have cameras up on the balcony and they should have caught the whole thing. We'll just check the videos and we'll check the videos and we'll let you know if we see anything that's useful, if we could tell you what happened. So my first question of this is, because that's all of, the 911 operator basically just says, oh yeah, that would be super helpful. Great. Just let the police know when they get there. The first thing that should have been said is, don't touch that. Don't touch the videos at all. You need to hand the information over to the police straight away. They should have been told not to touch it. They should have been told not to look at it, not to touch it, just to give the information to the police. So remember those videos, because that should become important information for later on. Super important information, as a matter of fact, and you'll find out why. And so, yeah, Jose is like, yeah, we'll just look and we'll tell the police when they get here. It's fine, whatever. And then he says that, personally, the last time he saw Tamla was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and she was in the kitchen, and he thinks she was waiting for a ride or waiting up until morning, whatever that means, because it's really weird. She was either waiting for a ride or waiting until morning. For what? He doesn't ever say what. It's just waiting for a ride or waiting until morning. And I want you to remember that, because conflict in story comes back with that later. But at this point in the 911 call, we're coming up on when 9:07, which is when the first officer, Officer Christian, who was the lead in the investigation, arrived on the scene. Officer Christian saw Jose and recognized him right away because of his history of being a felony probation officer. And so here's a number one problem to me. One of the number one problems to me. The person you have investigating a potential suspect is also their friend. And that's a big no-no in my opinion, because it's going to sway their ideas. It's going to sway their opinions. But that's how I feel about it. I feel like this is one of the main key points where the investigation was mishandled. I think it should have been waited for somebody else to come up on scene that didn't know Jose. Anyways, so it was determined immediately after the officers arrived on scene that Tamla was deceased. EMS was never dispatched to the scene, and shortly after, the coroner and CSI showed up, and the investigators made the call that she was deceased, which is usually unusual, as the EMS usually needs to come out to make the call to the coroner, so that the coroner can come out and give the official time, or at least say that the investigation's going to begin to find the time. It never is police that make the determination. Police have to call other people. It's not how things are done. But you'll come to notice that there are several things in this case that are done how things are not supposed to be done. When investigators found Tamla, so the way she was laying, again, she was face down. She had one arm down at her side, and the other arm was kind of out and up towards her head. And it seems like this is insignificant now, but it will become more clear why that's important. So remember that she had one arm up and one arm out, and her other arm was down at her side. It was really clear that her right wrist was swollen and broken and dislocated, and that was the one that was up and off out to the side. So they did send her body off for an autopsy, and it was partially because they found the position she was found in kind of odd. And they found that the lack of blood on the scene was kind of odd as well. So they wanted more information. But it was very quickly that they hypothesized a fall might be the cause of her death. So there was a little ledge downstairs outside that it's like one of those little ledges you put around this shout, like this small planter areas. It was just a tiny little ledge that it would be easy to trip over. So they hypothesized at one point that maybe she tripped and she didn't break her fall because she was going through some kind of medical event, like a heart attack or a stroke or something like that. But they quickly decided that that wasn't the case. Anyways, so they did have the other party members that had gone home return back to the house so they could do questioning. So they were doing the good part there. The big problem is while they had the two different groups of people that had left and people that had stayed separated, the people that were still in the house when they arrived were all put together in one room, and the people that had left were all put together in the same spot outside. So that could lead to the potential of, if there was something shady that was going on, all of these people can talk together and get their stories straight and have the same story. So it's really kind of odd. Usually they'll have people set aside in different places so they can't talk to each other. Seems really weird to me. Okay, really quick, we're going to go over when people started leaving. So in the reports, it says that John stated Sarah and Nicole were the first ones to leave, and they left around 10:30. And it's kind of unclear if it was due to having to take care of kids or having to take care of puppies. There were two different stories on every source I found on that one. Next to leave was 1:47, and that was when Bridget left, and that was when her husband came and picked her up. And that was the last time, again, that Tamla was seen alive, was when Bridget left. Then shortly after that, at 4:10, Marcy left, and it said she possibly left because she had a job she had to work on the weekends, and that's kind of why she was getting up earlier. At 7:45 a.m., Paula left, and then at 8:30, just a little bit before Madeline found Tamla, Tom and Stacy left. So if you remember, on the call with the 911 operator, Jose had said that he had last seen Tamla at 1 a.m. trying to decide if she wanted to leave or wait until morning. He also told the officer once he arrived that the last time he had saw Tamla was at 1:30 in the morning, and that she had said she was going to go outside, have a cigarette, and then she was either going to sleep on the couch or go upstairs and sleep in one of the spare bedrooms. Now, this is in direct conflict to what he said on the 911 operator call. So we already have changing in stories, and you're going to see this happens a lot. Inconsistencies in the stories is one of the biggest things we have here. Almost every member of the party tells the officer that at some point in the evening or early in the morning, Tamla wanted to leave, that she really wanted to go home, and they wouldn't let her drive home, which is understandable. If you've been drinking, don't drive home. So they took her keys, but they also wouldn't just let her leave. They wouldn't let her go, and it's not clear why they wouldn't just let her leave. I feel like if Tamla was stated as having such a great time up until whatever point that she wanted to leave, something between when she was having fun and when she decided she wanted to leave, something happened that quickly changed her opinion of wanting to be there, and they wouldn't let her go, probably due to whatever it is that happened. But, I mean, that shows me something is brewing and something is building, and clearly it ended up leading to this incident that took her life. In my opinion, it's still unclear exactly what happened. So also in the incident report, Jose tells the officers that while he was cleaning up the following morning, he found an unlit cigarette and a lighter on the porch that happened to be the brand that matched the brand that Tamla had been smoking that night. But this was after he told the 911 operator that he was woken up out of a dead sleep by Madeline when she was knocking on the door. So there's just one other conflict in the story that Jose has already told officers between when he last saw Tamla and what he was doing before Tamla was found deceased. It's noted that Jean and Jose state several times that Tamla was the only smoker. Actually, it's a lot of people say through the whole party that Tamla was the only one who smoked. And then it goes on and it morphs into somehow now it went from just Jose saw her at 1 a.m. or 1:30 a.m. to it was Jean and Jose are now both saying they saw her at 1 a.m. and she said she was going to go out and have a cigarette and then go to sleep. Jean then also brings up, oh, hey, well, I have this security app on my phone and it shows when the doors open and close. So I'll insert a picture of this phone app, this screenshot from her phone app that shows the time when the doors were opened and closed. Now, this information is a little bit useful because it does kind of corroborate or, give some insight into goings on in the house. But you have to stop and think. It only tells you when a door was opened and when a door was closed. It does not tell you how many people have gone in or out of that door. It doesn't tell you if anybody went out that door. A door could be opened and closed and nobody could have gone out it. So just bear in mind that, yes, this is semi-helpful, but at the same time, it really doesn't offer that much information at all. So the front door was opened at 1:47 a.m., and this was when Bridget left and Tamla is last reported alive. The balcony door opens at 1:49 and closes again at 1:50. It's assuming this was when someone would have been going outside to have a cigarette. The balcony door then opens again at 1:57 a.m., but it never closes. And Jean says that this must have been Tamla coming back out, or back inside. 7 minutes is about the time it would take to have a cigarette, so it could potentially be. But if this is the case, why did the door never close again? It opens at 1:57 and it never closes again. So I can't imagine Tamla being over at somebody's house that she's not really familiar with and just leaving their door open. It doesn't sound right to me. So I kind of question this timing and what's going on here. And another thing that a lot of people don't point out, it also shows that the garage door opens at 1:39 a.m. and closes again at 1:40 and then is opened again at 1:40 a.m. And then it shows that after it opens again at 1:40 a.m. that it was never closed. This was never brought up later on. It was never brought up when they were trying to figure out what was going on. But again, to me, it seems fishy. So Bridget and Tamla were reported to be the only ones up at this time, but they're going in and out of her garage door? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It seems really fishy, and I think that more should have been looked into that, because it makes me feel like somebody else was awake, somebody else was doing something. So they quickly continue to do investigation at the house. No samples of anything were taken, none of the cigarette butts that were in the ashtray, which it was noted that there were 2 different brands of cigarettes in the ashtray, but none of them were taken for testing, nothing like that. During the investigation at the house, it wasn't really clear if the scene was really locked down like it should have been in this case. So I just feel like a lot of things were missed or not hit because it seemed like they jumped straight to, she's got this broken, dislocated wrist. It looks like she was trying to break her fall. She must have just fallen. So they went out to notify Lee, Tamla's husband, and the rest of Tamla's family. And Tamla's family was instantly suspicious of her death as soon as they were notified about it. The partygoers said that they found her bag and her black leather jacket next to the front door. And she was found in the one-piece pajama set with the paw prints on it. And immediately her father said, "It's November. It was 30 degrees outside. There's no way she would have been outside without having her jacket on." And that it was actually even really surprising that she didn't have it on inside, given what she was wearing. Because again, she was from the islands. She was used to it being really hot. Anytime it was below 70, she was wearing a jacket inside. It didn't matter outside. She was always very cold. And so there's no way she would have been out in 30-degree weather without a jacket on, with how easy it was that she got cold. So they were immediately suspicious. Things weren't adding up just based off of that fact. So the next day, her autopsy results come in, and her blood alcohol level was 0.24, which is like 3 times the legal driving limit, which a lot of people will say is really high, but you have to take into account that some people just handle their alcohol better than others. And it was stated by everyone at the party that she never seemed overly intoxicated. She never seemed off balance. She never seemed too drunk, or, she never seemed like she couldn't handle what she was doing. So it's just one of those things. Sometimes it happens. Now, they did find traces of marijuana in her system and Xanax. The traces of marijuana it's not super unheard of, because they did say, hey, I thought I saw her smoking a joint outside, whatever. It's not that big a deal, but the Xanax was extremely confusing. Tamla did not take any medication. She didn't take any medication at all. They went through all of her belongings. There were no pill bottles found. Nobody knew where the Xanax had come from, but that was never looked into either. So it's just kind of, this information comes back, and she's on this strange medication for anxiety that makes you really drowsy, and no one looks into it. I found that really super odd as well. I feel like that would lead me to think that maybe somebody put it in her drink and she didn't know about it. But it wasn't a high amount, so I guess maybe they said since it wasn't a high amount, they weren't going to look into it. I don't know. I would have looked into that one further if it were me. Let's get into some of her other injuries. Her right wrist was severely broken, and there was a 1-inch laceration on it. There was also a laceration on her left forearm, bruises and lacerations on her fingers and shins, severe injuries on her head, neck, and torso, several superficial abrasions on her forehead, left eyelid, and bridge of her nose, right temple, and chin. She had a fracture of the C2 second vertebrae, which is a really common injury if you whip your head back and then slam your chin into something. But it takes quite a bit of force to break a vertebrae in your back. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't see that as being an injury you would get from a fall. She also had a laceration in the right ventricle of her heart, which is a hard traumatic injury to the chest. So say the most common way that you would find getting this particular kind of injury is if you were in a car accident or something, and the steering wheel slammed into your chest, and you would have had to have been going really fast, because it takes a really big force to do it, because none of her ribs or anything were broken. So it just, for some reason, isn't seeming to add up. Also, a big thing to note, and this is a huge thing to note, none of her facial bones were broken. There were 0 broken facial bones. It was said that it looked as if she had face planted. Her face was directly into the ground. How are you going to not break any bones? Smacking your face directly into the ground. At the very least, you're probably going to break a nose. But I mean, it's really common to get broken teeth and stuff like that too from hitting your face on the ground. Come on, it's your face. It was also noted that she had several spots of bleeding in her brain, and the official cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries caused by a fall from a great height, which was 14 feet. The 14-foot fall is what this great height was. Now, 14 feet is a lot, but I don't know if 14 feet is enough to cause multiple blunt force injuries, especially considering there isn't really anything you're hitting on the way down. Now, if you were falling 14 feet down a mountainside, that might be enough to do it, but 14 feet with nothing to hit in between and just the ground, I don't know if that would be enough to cause multiple blunt force injuries. I am not a doctor, though. I am not certified in any way to say that this is it. It could possibly be it. But here's another thing that kind of causes me to question this. There was nothing in her mouth or nasal cavities. There was nothing wrong with any of her teeth. If she had died from the impact of this fall, if she went face first into the ground, there would have at least been something in her mouth, especially with the, if she had the C2 vertebrae break. Again, you had to snap your head back and then have it go forward and then snap back. That doing that would cause your mouth to open as you're moving. This is how I'm visualizing it. Your mouth would open and it would go straight into the ground and you'd have like grass and dirt in your mouth. But they didn't find any of that in her mouth. And then the other question is she's not like skidding around on the ground or anything, and she just fell in grass. So where did the abrasions come from? I know they were superficial, but they were there. So I mean, there's a lot of questions, in my opinion, that don't really lead to answers. I do believe that multiple blunt force trauma was the cause of her death, which is horrific. But what I want to know really is, how were those injuries caused? Because, I mean, sure, it could be potentially from the fall. But in my mind, I just personally can't picture it. And so a huge point of controversy in this case, and something that is absolutely and completely unheard of, is absolutely no photos were taken during the autopsy. One of the main parts of an autopsy is the photographs that you take, because it's just how you document the whole process. It's the documentation is the pictures. And no pictures were taken during the autopsies. That alone just screams to me this case was not handled properly. Something is wrong. But it's just, I don't know, that is so weird. So because of the odd circumstances with the initial autopsy and things that seemed to be missing, and, you know, like I said, the family was really just not proud of how that went, they requested that a private independent autopsy be carried out, and this was carried out by the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the GBI. And according to the family, this autopsy showed that some of the injuries were inflicted post-mortem, but I wasn't able to find like actual documentation of the second autopsy. I think that what's happening is they may be keeping that information more private as they're trying to continue to pursue seeking justice for Tamla, and they need to have not all of the facts out there. Statements from all the people that were witnesses that attended the party were taken, but not until a few weeks after the day of the party, and there was many conflicting statements from everyone. So again, everyone at the party was super insistent that Tamla was the only one who was smoking, but there were reports of 2 lighters and 2 different brands of cigarettes that they saw outside. But for whatever reason, the police didn't find it necessary to take those cigarette butts into evidence for testing, which is really sad because at this point, DNA could have proven that, yes, there were indeed more than one person outside smoking. And if there was another person outside smoking, maybe they had more information on what happened. The interviews were crazy and incredibly contradictory, and in some cases, incredibly unprofessional. At one point, Jean had even bought gift cards to try and give the police officers during Madeline's interview, which was being conducted in her home, which of course was the home where the initial incident happened. So I always understood that the way interviews for stuff like this happened was at the police station, or at the very least, Detailed interviews should have been done the day of the incident, not weeks later. Again, my opinion, I am not in law enforcement. I'm not a police officer. I do not know how this stuff works. I could be very wrong. Several of the witnesses mentioned that when they first saw Tamla, that both of her hands were down at her side. However, it was in the police notes that when the police arrived, she did have that one hand that was slightly up and out. Jose was one of the ones who had stated that her hands was down at her side, and Jose was asked who was it that moved her arm, and he said he wasn't sure, that when he went inside to go get the officer upon their arrival, that was the last time that he had saw Tamla, and to this moment, no one has claiming to have ever moved her arm. So we really didn't get any really great information from the interviews, aside from very conflicting information, different information. I'm going to leave a link down below to the transcript of the interviews that you can go through and read them yourself if you like. There's just so much information in there that I wasn't able to really kind of go through all of them myself. I know like Bridget's interview was like 47 pages long, and they only got to ask her like 4 different questions. Because as soon as she went to answer one question, she would rant on so many different topics that the question never really seemed to get answered. So I don't know if she was just nervous or what was going on. I mean, if I was at a party and someone died, it would probably freak me out. So I'm not going to judge at all. It's just really kind of hard to say what happened, because we can't get a solid single story to match up to really know. There was never really any good media coverage of what happened with Tamla until mid-December, when Tamla's best friend Michelle Graves became more outspoken about the case. And this is when the media really became a lot more invested in what was going on, and Michelle was starting to bring out the fact that there were a lot of conflicting stories. Michelle was stating that everyone that attended the party was giving out always changing stories, and they all say the reason that these stories were all changing is because initially they were told that Tamla fell off the balcony, and as more information started coming out about what was happening, they all started changing their stories. So it's like they were changing their stories to kind of fit what the police were saying happened. Now, let's get on to the videos, because we talked about how Jose and Jean had mentioned to 911 that they had these video cameras that they were going to check. And I know that this should be a crucial point into finding out what happened to Tamla. So the police never received those videos. And since it was made public when the case was closed, you can see a log of the videos. And in those logs of the videos, you can see that there are no videos for the day of the party and the days surrounding the incident, but that there are plenty of videos for other days around those, the few days before and after the incident. And you can also find a picture of an email that Jean had sent to the law enforcement. And what that email says is that while Jean was getting the videos ready for law enforcement, she must have somehow accidentally deleted them. And then it goes on to say that Jean isn't a very tech-savvy person, and she provides the officers with her username and password for the account and tells them that they are more than welcome to try and retrieve the information themselves, which they were never able to be retrieved. So nobody but Jean and Jose got to see what was on those. And to me, that's very suspicious. It could be very innocent. It very easily could be very innocent. I'm not a very tech-savvy person either, but if I wasn't a very tech-savvy person, my first instinct would be to give the information directly over to the police and not try and mess with it myself. That's just me. Every person is going to be different. Hopefully, something can be figured out. Who knows? So court records show that at some point, a temporary protective order was put by Jean against Michelle, but it was quickly dismissed, and this was in November, which just 1 month after Tamla passed away. Tamla's friends and family think that it was an intimidation tactic because Michelle was also sent a cease and desist order to stop questioning things about Tamla's case. Jose, again, who worked for the county and the courts, was later placed on administrative leave on 12/17/2018 for, quote, investigation pertaining to you using your position to access confidential files on a current investigation surrounding a death in which you were a witness. So essentially what that's saying is he was placed on administrative leave because he used his account to look up Tamla's case. On 12/20/2018, Jose was then fired for loss of confidence for illegally accessing confidential files relating to Tamla Horsford. I have no words for that one. To me, it feels like they were wanting to look up what the information the police were saying was, kind of where the case was leading, what the police were seeing, and then trying to shift their stories to match that perspective to get the case closed. 11/7/2018, Jose went into her incident file, which was just days after Tamla had died. On 11/20/2018, he accessed Tamla's files again, and just a few days after that, he tried to access the restraining order that Jean had filed against Michelle. So he was really trying to use his position in the court system to get information about what was going on with this case and what was going on with Jean and Michelle's stuff. But he did get caught and he did get fired. So at least the system is working in that manner, because I think that's entirely inappropriate. On 2/20/2019, shortly after the media began following the case, the police came out and said that they were closing the case and had ruled it as an accidental death, stating that none of her injuries aligned with foul play, stating, quote, it was a party. They were drinking. She was drinking. Most of the partygoers had gone to bed at the time, and she was on the deck alone. Sadly, at this point in time, Tamla's case faded from the public eye. However, in May of 2020, it became a topic of advocacy again during the anti-police protests of 2020 in relation to the George Floyd. On 6/5/2020, Ralph E. Fernandez wrote a letter to the family. Now, Ralph E. Fernandez was the family's attorney. So even though it had been 2 years later, the media wasn't really keeping it in focus, and we hadn't really heard much about what was going on. The family still had an attorney, and the family was still trying to fight. And so I'm going to read you a snippet of information from this letter that Mr. Fernandez wrote to the family. Quote, the review reflects that a homicide is a strong possibility. Witness statements are in conflict. A potential subject handled the body as well as evidence prior to law enforcement arrival. Evidence was disposed of and no inquiry followed. The scene was not preserved. Evidence was inappropriately handled. The investigation was compromised by unauthorized access in disclosure to potential targets and witnesses. A remarkable fact is that there were no photographs during the autopsy of Tamla's body. This had to be done at someone's directive because such a practice is unheard of. It appears Tamla was in a struggle. There are abrasions noted consistent with that scenario. There were parallel scratches on one arm. Since they were fresh, photos would have proven recent use of defensive force, but having no photos, injuries are to our detriment. There was one X-ray yet the injury noted as the cause of death are nowhere. The town of Cumming has a history which raises eyebrows. After conducting my extensive review, I have come to the conclusion that the truth never had a chance here. Here we are, fighting an uphill battle because those who wear the badges and were entrusted with the investigative task failed you. This is not over. It will never be over. Be safe, be strong. We will get to the bottom of this. Which is just, all in all, a incredibly powerful statement. Tamla's name was spread far and wide across the internet, starting with protests in Cumming, who included her name on the signs alongside the names of other Black Americans killed by police in recent years. And a change.org petition calling for the case to be reopened got more than 586,000 signatures on it. And rappers such as T.I. and 50 Cent were making posts on social media about the case, asking for a second investigation, and it brought a lot of attention to the case as a whole. On June 12, 2020, Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Freeman sent a letter to the GBI requesting that the case be opened and investigated by them. That the investigation was best undertaken by an independent law enforcement agency, although the conclusion of the investigation came quickly and it was determined that there would be no criminal charges filed with the GBI. There is no evidence that anyone else was responsible for Miss Horsford's death or that foul play was in any way involved. Forsyth County District Attorney Penny Penn said in a statement, "The facts overwhelmingly indicate that she died as a result of a tragic accident. Therefore, that concludes the office's involvement in the matter." The family at this time is still trying to get the FBI to investigate the case. They never really wanted the GBI to investigate, and this is for many different reasons, all of which would be explained on the change.org page, which I will link down below as it is still active. But a lot of them are like different connections between people in the GBI and the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office that knew each other and regularly worked together and are friends. So there's a lot of just really strange information going on between the GBI and the Forsyth County District Attorney, according to the family, that lead them to believe that this wasn't really properly investigated in the first place or reinvestigated by the GBI. It would be great to see the FBI come in and at least do an investigation as to why the case was so horribly mishandled by both the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office and the GBI, because clearly there were a lot of balls dropped here and a lot of things that should have been done that weren't. And I mean, it's not like this case was like a long time ago when investigating wasn't as advanced as it is now, but I feel like there were a lot of things that they could have done that they didn't do and should have done. So that's going to kind of be the wrap up for the case of Tamla Horsford. It's really horrifically sad. Her case was not handled in the way it should have been. Regardless of what the reason be, something needs to be done about this. So I encourage everyone to click on the link below, the change.org link, read through some of the information there that the family has provided, read more about Tamla's life and who she was. She was an amazing person. It's horrific that her family doesn't get to have her in their lives anymore, and I'd love to see more done about it. So thank you for joining. I hope you all come back for the next video. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and the little bell that'll notify you anytime that I upload any new videos. And take care. Goodbye.